Hi, everyone. It's Miss Hakbari in the library. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the book, The Graveyard Book by the author Neil Gaiman. You might be familiar with one of Neil Gaiman's other books. He also wrote Coraline, along with several other books. But this book, The Graveyard Book, is fascinating to me, especially around Halloween, because it is sort of creepy. And I want to tell you more about it. But before we do that, I actually want to start with reading the beginning of the book to you, because this is one of my very favorite starts to any book I've ever read. Chapter 1: How Nobody Came to the Graveyard. There was a hand in the darkness, and it held a knife. The knife had a handle of polished black bone and a blade finer and sharper than any razor. If it sliced you, you might not even know you had been cut, not immediately. The knife had done almost everything it was brought to that house to do, and both the blade and the handle were wet. The street door was still open just a little, where the knife and the man who held it had slipped in, and wisps of nighttime mist slithered and twined into the house through the open door. The man Jack paused on the landing. With his left hand, he pulled a large white handkerchief from the pocket of his black coat, and with it he wiped off the knife and his gloved right hand, which had been holding it. Then he put the handkerchief away. The hunt was almost over. He had left the woman in her bed, the man on the bedroom floor, the older child in her brightly colored bedroom, surrounded by toys and half-finished models. That only left the little one, a baby, barely a toddler, to take care of. One more, and his task would be done. He flexed his fingers. The man Jack was, above all things, a professional, or so he told himself, and he would not allow himself to smile until the job was completed. His hair was dark, and his eyes were dark, and he wore black leather gloves of the thinnest lambskin. The toddler's room was at the very top of the house. The man Jack walked up the stairs, his feet silent on the carpeting. Then he pushed open the attic door, and he walked in. His shoes were black leather, and they were polished to such a shine that they looked like dark mirrors. You could see the moon reflected in them, tiny and half full. The real moon shone through the casement window. Its light was not bright, and it was diffused by the mist. But the man Jack would not need much light. The moonlight was enough. It would do. He could make out the shape of the child in the crib, head and limbs and torso. The crib had high, slatted sides to prevent the child from getting out. Jack leaned over, raised his right hand, the one holding the knife, and he aimed for the chest. And then he lowered his hand. The shape in the crib was a teddy bear. There was no child. So I love how that book starts. I love that there are illustrations. I love that there's a very sinister tone being set from the very beginning of that book. We almost start our story with just the character of the hand that's holding that knife. And then we learn that there's this man, Jack, and his job is to come and kill this entire family. And we don't know why, but we know that he has this horrible job that he's been doing. And the fourth member of the family that he's sent to kill is the baby. And when he gets up to the baby's room, the baby isn't there. And what we learn as we read on is the baby had, as toddlers sometimes do, climbed out of the crib, kind of crawled their way downstairs, and went out the open door. Jack left the door open when he came in, and the baby went out into the night. And the baby can walk a little bit, so this baby is sort of toddling down the street. And when Jack realizes that the baby has left, he takes off out of the house to find him. And the other interesting thing that happens, and this is where the title starts to make sense, is the closer the baby gets down the street, the further down the street, the closer they get to a graveyard. And there are ghosts living in this graveyard that see this drama unfolding ahead of them. They see this baby coming towards them, and they see a terrible figure in a black coat with a bloody knife running after the child. And without really thinking about it, they take the baby into the graveyard, and that makes him invisible to Jack, to the assassin Jack. And so as long as this baby stays in the graveyard, he is safe. And so the rest of the story is what it's like for this boy, who they name Nobody, to grow up in amongst ghosts and in amongst a graveyard. And knowing that there's this threat of this assassin who's still out there, still hunting for the baby. It's a fascinating book. It's definitely kind of creepy at times. There are ghosts that are main characters, and we kind of get a little window into that imagination of what is it like to live as a ghost, and how does that compare? And also kind of think about um, what is it that kids actually need when they're growing up, because it doesn't take too long before living in a cemetery, living in a graveyard isn't really enough for our main character. So if you like supernatural, spooky ghost stories, you might enjoy reading The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman.